Welcome to Good News from the Corner. I'm Jay Beadenhorn. I'm your podcast host, and I'm also the rector of St. John's Episcopal Church here in Memphis, Tennessee. On this episode of our podcast today, you'll hear from our senior Warden Erin Raccah as she talks to us about St. John's budget and how we manage our finances and why we need your support in the coming year. Next, you'll hear from Emily Kay, who is the co-chair of our Stewardship Committee. And Emily is going to talk about St. John's and what it has meant to her over her lifetime and why she continues to support this place. And finally, the third recording you'll hear on this episode is Erin Raccah, our senior warden, and her husband, Jim Shepard. And they're going to talk a little bit about what St. John's has meant to them over the years and how their giving has changed over the years. I really am grateful that you've found this podcast, and I hope that the Good News from the Corner finds you and yours well today and always. Stay tuned for more good content on this episode and plenty of future episodes ahead. Thanks. We'll see you here at the corner.
McAllister's. She and my husband Jim and I are going to tell a little bit about our stories. We have very different stories because she's been here forever and we're new. We've been here for 15 years. So we have a little bit different stories, so we're going to give you a little bit of that as well. So that's what we're going to cover in the next few minutes. Let me see if this isn't my laptop, so Donna, you might have to tell me how to advance the slides. Okay, did that work? Yep. Yeah. Okay, great. So as a reminder, this is our mission statement. This is what we're doing here together. We are here together where the presence of the Holy Spirit binds us through reverence and worship, sacrament and scripture, music and fellowship, and ministry to our fellow parishioners and our wider community. What we're going to talk about this week and next week is really that last piece. It's sort of the foundation of our stewardship work, which is ministry to our fellow parishioners and to the wider community. Because frankly, that's how our money's used, right? That's how we're using our money. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak up a bit?
Oh, sure. I don't have a microphone, but let me.
We can get that.
I don't know if I need one, but yeah, I can speak up. Okay. So, let me tell you a little bit about what pledging is. Now, this is our beloved Mississippi River, right? So this is my metaphor. Pledging is a little bit like the Mississippi River. So you got to think of St. John's as a family. St. John's is not a building. St. John's isn't even Father Jay, as much as we love him. St. John's is all of us, right? It's all of us. It's the whole family. And like every family, we have recurring expenses. We have expenses that come up every month to take care of our home, our building, our utilities, the salaries of the people who keep this place humming along, including Father Jay and Donna. This is important to know. This parish pays for the clergy and pays for the staff. The diocese does not give us money. I think some people think that we're funded by the diocese. We're not. We're funded by the people in this room. If I say something wrong, just
that's quite right.
Check me, okay?
Of course.
So we pay for everything. We pay for the building repairs. We pay for the security that I think we're all really happy to have out there. We pay for the security. We pay for the music. We pay for the food. So it is all on us. And we have to ask our parishioners every year to contribute to that budget. And the best way that we do this is through pledging. And pledging, the reason I've made an analogy to the Mississippi is that in a perfect world, pledging would be a predictable revenue stream. It would be something that flows regularly, just like our beautiful, mighty Mississippi. It would be consistent. It would be strong. It would be predictable. So each year in the fall, and you're going to hear this again, Emily, end of September, I think, September 29th is the kickoff. Each year in the fall, we're going to ask our parish to tell us what prayerfully they think they can contribute to our family budget in the upcoming year. And so then people will prayerfully consider what they can manage. Because remarkably, when people make this promise on this card that says, I think I can give X number of dollars in 2025, like 100% of people come through on their promise, almost 100% of the people. And the people who say they can't come through on their promise because maybe they've had a change in circumstances, they tell us. So when people put that money down, like we can almost count that in the bank as going to be there in 2025, which is really, really helpful. So we take those cards and we use that in the fall, the late fall, to build our budget for 2025. And if we raise, let's say, $1 million, then we need to build a budget that's under $1 million. If we raise more, then we can do more. And then there's a committee that does this work. It's called F&A, Finance and Administration. And they take the pledges that have come in, add it all up and say, here's our budget. And then they figure out line by line what we can spend that money on. And then that budget goes to the vestry for approval. And the vestry is the governing board, and y'all have elected your vestry. It's 15 people, it's 5 people for each class, and so there's 3 classes in there. And we do not approve a budget that is not balanced. So if F&A were to come to us and say, we're going to spend 1.5, we only brought in 1, but we're going to spend 1.5. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Like, who would do that? So we're not going to do that. So we will only approve a budget that's a balanced budget, which means we have to build a budget that's within the pledges that come into us. So let me tell you a little bit about our pledging community. So we have 168 people, or we call them pledging units, which is a terrible term, but it just means like a family or an individual. Like Jim and I are in the same family, so we're considered one pledging unit, not 2 people. So we have 168 people or families that have contributed to our budget for 2024. 137 of them pledged, which means they turned in that little card, right? They told us what they were going to give for 2024. And that made up $1.24 million. And then we had 31 people or families that give, like they just send money regularly every month, or they put money in the plate, and they give, but they don't pledge, and that makes up 100,000. We love this 100,000, but it would be really much more helpful if it were in this number, because we can't really count on that, right? Like, we can look at past years and say, okay, they've kind of given about 5,000 a year, maybe they'll give 5,000 this year, but like, would you really want to count on that if you were your own family? Like, that's not a promise. So we love it, but it would help us more if it were in the pledged column, but that's okay. So important things to note about these numbers. This is not, 1 to 2 people, right? Like, we don't have 1 or 2 big donors that give our money. We have 168 of us who are giving money. And that's really important, because that means that each of us has a role to play. I don't care if it's $500 or $5,000 or $50,000. Like, everybody has a role to play, because we are not counting on 1 or 2 big people. And as I said before, we're not counting on the diocese. We're not counting on like a tuition. I mean, we don't have like a revenue stream other than us. Sometimes people, and I know you're going to hear this from the Stewardship Committee, sometimes people kind of get on autopilot. So you fill out your card one year, you say, I'm going to give X number of dollars, and then the card comes the next year, and you put the same X, and then the card comes the next year, and you put the same X, because you're just kind of on autopilot. But church expenses are not on autopilot, because we have inflation just like everybody else has inflation. So I know that the Stewardship Committee, as I said, we're not real good about talking about money, but we are going to ask, like, could you not be on autopilot? Like, just think about, what this place means to you, and think about the fact that our expenses are going up just like everybody else's. So if it's possible in your family to give a little bit of an increase, I know that would be appreciated. But let me tell you a little bit about the Stewardship Committee, because they are doing such great work. We're doing something different this year. We've got it led by two couples. So the McAllisters and the Kays are our chair and our co-chair. And then we've got this wonderfully diverse demographic committee that is doing all the work to get this going for the new year. So Joel E. Smith, he goes by E, Scott Trammell, Maggie Murph, Buddy Dearman, Collie Krausnick, Carrie Benetone, Paul Gillespie, Scott Adams, and Leslie Dillon. Did I miss anything? Okay. So they're going to be talking to us in the fall with a kickoff on September 29th. Hi, Maggie. Good to see you back there. About stewardship. Is there anything y'all want to say about stewardship right now before I go on to my next slide? All right, I think this is my last slide on the business, and then we'll talk about the stories. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so this is hard to see, which is why I had y'all come up to the closer so you could see it. So this is how our funds are used. You'll notice personnel is half of it, right? Personnel is half of it. And then other big expenses, building and maintenance is about 11%. Administrative is 17%. Administrative is a catch-all. It's utilities, bills. I mean, it's just kind of running the building. Is 17%. The PLC is about 7%. Music is 3%. Worship is 2%. We do make a diocesan contribution, so we do have to give under our rules of being part of the diocesan family. We do have to give 10% for of our monies collected to the diocese. I can talk about that a little bit more in a second. And then we do have a little bit, it shows up as 0, but I think in the budget it's like 3,000 to 5,000. It just didn't make a percentage. Christian education and for children and adults. We also have some funds for youth. And I don't know if you'll know this, but we raised like $2,500 for the youth program with our burgers and bingo. I think we netted less than that. I know we netted less than that, but still, like that's how much revenue we brought in from burgers and bingo. And that's all going for the youth to be able to do their Sunday suppers and their rock climbing and their pickleball and all the other stuff that they've got going on. So this is our operating budget. There's not really anything that you wouldn't expect, right? I mean, this is pretty predictable stuff. Now, the big stuff you see going on out here, like the building repairs, that doesn't come out of an operating budget. That's got a special fund, that was set aside for big capital maintenance stuff. So that has its own fund. Other things have their own funds that are not part of our operating budget. Friends of Music, that puts on the concerts, like in 2 weeks, next week. 22nd. Next week, the 22nd, Luna Nova is going to be here. That is funded by Friends of Music. That's a restricted fund. Building repairs is a restricted fund. I think outreach is a restricted fund. So let me just talk about the diocesan contribution for a second. Everything that we collect goes, 10% is going to go to the diocese. But if it's in a restricted fund, that doesn't count. So if we set aside money, if we do a special thing that we have to do, and it's not part of our operating budget, it's not going in that 10%. Friends of Music, that kind of thing. We don't have to send them 10% of the special restricted things. But that's how it's used. It's not terribly surprising. But I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions. And if not, then Emily can come up. Yes?
Would you tell people what PLC stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry. PLC is the Parish Life Center, which, if you haven't been there, is this great gym on the other side of our parking lot that has basketball courts and a walking track, really outdated weightlifting equipment, but it is a great facility. So if you've got little kids and you were planning a birthday party, this didn't really happen to us, right? Planning a birthday party at Shelby Farms and then it pours rain and you have to call really fast to find a place to have a birthday party. The PLC is a great place to have a birthday party if it rains on your birthday day. What other questions can I answer? Yes?
The money in the offering every Sunday, where does that go?
It goes into that operating budget. It goes into sort of the giving not pledged. I think that's right.
There's a designation called loose offering.
It's it gets pooled with everything else for the budget. Yeah. What other questions?
Got one here.
Yes.
So 168 pledging units.
Yeah.
How many units are there in the church?
I think that's out of about 450 active members, which means they come to church at least once a year and they're known to the rector. It's kind of a loose definition, but out of about 450.
But that's people,
That's people,
right?
not
That's
units.
people, not units, right?
Right.
I would say it's probably half. I'm going to ballpark it and say it's probably half of the people who really might be in a position because they come regularly to be giving.
And I think your question, Caroline, points to one of the kind of growth edges in the life of the parish, right? Those people who are exploring life at St. John's. As the rector, I would love to see, I've asked the vestry, how do we build a path for these people who are visiting to be sitting around the table for a vestry meeting in 10 or 15 years, moving from kind of exploring, maybe, putting a 20 in the plate, maybe not. How do we build that out in a sustainable way so that we're inviting and drawing people into what's happening here?
And I would like to emphasize a point that Erin made is we need everybody. We want everybody to feel a part of St. John's, and one way you can do that is contribute to the ongoing ministry of St. John's. So this is not just if you can send $1,000. No, if you can send $5 for the whole year, that's more buy-in, and that is between you and God, and it's important. It's important because this is also a spiritual endeavor. It's not only a financial endeavor, but it's a spiritual endeavor, giving back to God what God has so freely given to us. So your $5 counts.
Yeah.
Sure does.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions, Emily? I'm going to turn it over to you.
As long as I can remember, there's been St. John's looming large in my life. These grounds, these buildings, the sanctuary, except for the PLC, which wasn't even a twinkle in the eye back then, are much the same as they were 62 years ago when I first came to know them. Even the wonderful smells of the church, those of the parish hall, the old Sunday school rooms upstairs, the basement, the old children's chapel, the smoldering scent of the candles when they were lit by acolytes using matches before they started using lighters, and even the smell of the crayons we used during Sunday school are deeply embedded in my memory and are still prevalent these many years later. They are just a small part of the myriad of things in the church that bring me inexplicable comfort and peace. Strangely enough, all 4 of us Freeburg siblings were baptized in the Presbyterian church. But when I was 4, my mother decided she belonged here, and thanked the Lord that she did. From then on, the Freeburg family became fully incorporated into St. John's life. Sunday schools, altar guilds, search committees, children's choirs, acolyting, youth groups, Girl Scouts. We had a Girl Scout troop here, and I only joined because I wanted the uniform. I think I got 1 badge, but it was fun. And anywhere else we could be plugged in. I well remember church was the priority. I well remember being the only one of my friends spending a Saturday night out at someone's house and knowing that no matter what, my mother would be in that car on the curb waiting to take me to Sunday school the next morning. Everyone else was sleeping in. I came up in the ranks with several friends that I still see here today. Kim Brown Mullins, Virginia Donaldson Curry, Martha Flowers, and D. Work Thomas, to name a few. And Leslie Dillon and I routinely reminisce and laugh about those early days. Those were the warmest and most wonderful of times. I never imagined then that my own 4 children would be baptized and confirmed here and learn to love it as I do. Of course, we are not charged for any of these experiences we love, and let's be honest, sometimes take for granted at St. John's. There are no dues or admission fees to supplement the many wonderful opportunities our church affords us. She is here for us when we need her and waits patiently for us when we don't know that we need her. On Sunday mornings, we have coffee, fellowship, classes, a service, and more fellowship, and we walk away, of course, without having to pay the thing. And yet, most would say it's the most important part of their week. There's no charge for baptism or confirmation, and yet those are life-changing rituals that are literally a part of us for the rest of our lives. That's what you call a good deal. I often think about how my giving to St. John's aligns with what I pay to be a part of other things in my life. Just about every activity I'm involved in comes with a price tag. be it dues, initiation fees, or minimums to be met, tuitions, or simply payment just to cover the attendance in an event. Harvey's and my pledge to this church, our favorite place, is our payment, if you will, for all the opportunities that we take advantage of here. It's how we ensure that all the things we love about St. John's stay at St. John's. When we were younger parents with 4 small children, tithing was simply not an option. We were down to the last dollar just getting through a typical year. But we gave what we could. Though it wasn't much, our pledge helped, and it did make a difference. I feel as if we are part of an extraordinary situation here at the corner of Central and Greer. We embody the true essence of the word camaraderie, which Webster defines as mutual trust and friendship among people who spend a lot of time together. I love knowing that I can count on my fellow parishioners for support, prayer, and friendship. We are teammates cheering on the same wonderful team. Bottom line, we all want what's best for St. John's, which in turn turns out to be best for us. In that light, I want to emphasize how important your pledge dollars mean. There are so many wonderful suggestions out there, but not the money to back them up. In order to continue with our youth programming, supper clubs, Christmas pageants, texting capabilities, live streaming, and all the rest of the things that I admittedly take for granted, we need to rise to the occasion and own our part in not just sustaining, but attaining and reaching for the heavens and giving our church the means by which she can prosper and grow. Of course, the most important reason to give is that God tells us to. There are no ifs and or buts about that. As the adopted scripture for this year's stewardship campaign from 2 Corinthians reminds us, and I'm sure Erin you'll repeat this verse, but from 2 Corinthians, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Let's all be cheerful and generous givers this year and in the future. After all, He gave it to us in the first place. It's really His.
I really wish we had gone first because I don't want to follow that, but I'll just tell you a little bit about Jim and I, since we're sort of newer. That was before he broke his arm.
That's how he broke his arm.
So Jim and I met. You can come up. Jim and I met in Southern California, where I grew up, and his dad was in the military, so he was based in Southern California, and we went to the same high school. We have been together since we were like 15 and 17 years old. That actually was just taken last year, but we've been married for about 25 years. We moved to Memphis in 2006. I'm an attorney. I was with International Paper. I moved here for International Paper in 2006. And we, importantly, have been a one-income family by choice. Jim was a police officer in New York. Some of you have heard him talk about his time as a police officer in New York. Happened to coincide with the attack on the World Trade Center. So some of you have heard him talk about his time in New York. And when we moved to Memphis, we had 3 kids, and the economics were kind of obvious, right? I'm a lawyer, he was a cop. Like, I make more. I mean, that was just the way it was, right? So when you've got 3 small children that were 1, 2, and 3 when we moved here, Jim's like, well, I want to stay home and be a full-time dad. I'll be a full-time dad. I'm talking for you. Feel free to jump in.
You're speaking for me well.
Speaking for yourself. Okay.
I'll stop you.
Okay. All right. But that came with a lot of choices, right? We don't have fancy cars. We don't go on fancy vacations. So like Emily said, I mean, we've had private school tuitions. Now we've got 3 in college. Like, our ability to give kind of ebbs and flows. And so we've given a lot more of our time and talent over the last decade than we have financially, which time and talent will be discussed next week. But we've sort of fallen in that. Now, when our kids finish college, are we going to be able to give more to the church? 100%. And we've given what we could over the last...
What do you mean 100%?
But not 100%. Thank you for clarifying that. So we've given what we could. We've given it joyfully. But we have sort of buttressed it with the time and talent where we couldn't give financially. we've been honest about it. We've been upfront about it. Sometimes I've called Penny and I'm like, yeah, I put that pledge on there and that's not going to work. Let me change that. Liam decided to go to SMU, all the money's going to SMU. So, we've been honest about it. We've done what we could joyfully. But Jim, what do you want to contribute out there?
What was that, 2 Corinthians, joyful giving? Well, Erin convinced me that's a good thing to give joyfully. And this is proof. She didn't have to twist my arm too hard. I think I agree with this. I love what you had to say. And it's kind of that type of experience from people like you that has made St. John's so authentic in its purpose and the relationships it has. And for you young people, you will see as time goes on, as soon as in 5 years, what that means. When we first came here, it was a rough neighborhood up in my mind. And then I started to meet some of the people here at St. John's, and it almost immediately recalibrated my moral compass. So being a cop in New York City on patrol, you're kind of like a scrubbing bubble to society. And that is one filthy society. And I was one busy scrubbing bubble. So I decided it was, because I still get goosebumps, becoming a full-time dad, we are now starting to see the results of that decision. Not only do I know my sons very well, but also I know their friends, and I know their families, and that has been wonderful. But that calibration happened not just with my love with Erin, but here at St. John's, where it kept me very centered and focused and calm down. This too shall pass, and you'll find out that things are much better than you realize. The grass is green on both sides. It's just how you choose to look at it. And so having young people in your life, including the young man in the orange shirt at the very end, staring at the golf course, there's a future for you there. It's all wonderful, but for me, it happened very much here. I have a terrible motorcycle habit, but that's because I get to meet other people in the countryside and where I go, and they are remarkably happy people everywhere you go. So there is, I have no, and I have St. John's to thank for that. So being a stay-at-home dad has been a remarkable experience, and any young dads, fairly young dads, if there's any tips or advice, or if you know of anyone, I would love to talk to them, and also to listen to them. I can almost see it and sense it before a word is even said. So, but I thank St. John's for that.
So when we came here, we first came here to St. John's, we sat over on that couch right there, and we asked I think it was the associate rector at the time, we were angry. We were really angry coming out of 9/11. We asked him, when does Jesus allow us to fight? That's all we wanted to know. When are we allowed to fight? What made Jesus mad? Did Jesus ever fight? And when do we get to fight? Because we wanted to fight. And the transformation that went on in our hearts from anger to love, I know it saved us. It saved us in a lot of different ways. So we are extraordinarily grateful to St. John's. Jim was baptized here as an adult.
Yep.
You were baptized with our children.
With our critters?
No. Our children were baptized. You were baptized with our sons here, and you were confirmed here. Our children were all confirmed here, and when we got married, we were married by a judge in New York, and so we weren't part of a church at the time, and so we did on our 10-year anniversary, we did a blessing of our vows here for our 10-year anniversary. So we've hit almost all the sacraments. I think twice is good. Anyway, so we just wanted to say that this place has meant the world to us, and thank you all for keeping it going for the next generations.
Thanks for tuning in today. You've been listening to the Good News from the Corner podcast. St. John's Episcopal Church is located at the corner of Central and Greer in Memphis, Tennessee. Our parish website is www.stjohnsmemphis.org. You can also catch us on all of the normal social media platforms. You can join us for church at 10:30 on Sunday morning on our St. John's Memphis YouTube channel. Share the Good News podcast with somebody. And remember, you matter to God. Your life is not yours alone. Come see us sometime.